All right, joining us at this point in time is Mr. Ashneer Grover, former MD of BharatPe and renowned social media influencer and business guru. Of course, everyone knows Ashneer. Ashneer, appreciate you talking to us. Well, it's not only a sad day for the business community, it's a sad day for the entire country. And, my question lies in the first sentence that I have posed in front of you, that Ratan Tata was such a personality that regardless of what you did, where you did, you loved him, you adored him, you admired him. What was it about him, according to you, that stood out so much and perhaps will, outdate his survival? People will remember him for a long time for, who he was as a person rather than the businessman.
No, I think it's absolutely fair to be sad, but I think it's a life well lived. He lived up to 86, 87 years. And in terms of the richness of his life, what he has done in terms of business, what he's done in terms of philanthropy, which really gave him a lot of pleasure. I think it's a great life and it's a life to be celebrated. I think the why everyone is universally pouring out a lot of respect on his demise is pretty simple, because among businessmen he stands out as someone very, very different. So most businessmen are seen as very, very clinical, methodical, going about making money, making value, but he's seen as a person who, despite being a third generation into business, was very passionate about building the brand of the Tatas, making sure that institutions get built, not just immediate businesses, immediate profit. And that is something which is very refreshing for everyone. And that's why everyone is sort of, not to my surprise, but everyone is coming out and pouring their grief out for the person, because he was just a unique person in today's world, very, very different than anyone else you run into.
Ashneer, have you ever had the pleasure of meeting Mr. Ratan Tata?
No, unfortunately, I've never met him during his lifetime. No.
What do you think he did for the business community? He was somebody who learned all his tricks, in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, but he understood the nuances of the modern investor. He understood the nuances of the modern entrepreneur. Is that rare for a businessman?
Absolutely, absolutely. See, most of the businessmen in India are, not in a derogatory sense, but most of us are one-trick ponies, right? Like, we figure out one opportunity in the market, we crack it, and then that is good enough for generations in some sense. But here's a person who would keep evolving himself. Now, just think of his lifetime, right? He's a person, when India got independent, would have been 10 years old. So he would still have some recollection of what was happening when India became India. And then he lives up to the new age where he's investing in startups. So he's not a guy who got stuck in a certain decade, right? He just kept evolving himself, kept trying new things, taking new risks, right? Think of it this way: who brought Starbucks to India? Starbucks India is a Tata JV, right? But he would still, in his 60s or 70s, have this understanding that the youth want a coffee drinking culture. They want a much more global brand, and then he brings this to India. If you look at, people talk about a bit of failures, they talk about Nano. Yeah, I mean, you might see it as a failure, but the way I look at it is, it's just a stepping stone for him to maybe get big into EVs, right? Because fundamentally, when you thought about India and you say want to bring a real low value car to it, eventually you'll get to it, not in the form you started, but eventually you will do it. So in that sense, I think he was just evolving. He was just evolving decade over decade, keeping up with the times. Investing in 40 odd startups towards in his 80s. Half the 80-year-old people you talk to don't know how to operate a phone. So to have someone of that actually applying his mind and thinking of them as great business to invest his money in, he's just a very unique individual.
Ashneer, India is also considered, the startup capital today. And if we look at the legacy that Mr. Ratan Tata leaves behind, how much of his, risk-taking ability led to this kind of a reputation for India, or rather led to this kind of a confidence for the young entrepreneur in India?
Yes, yeah, I think I don't think the quantum of money he invested was that huge, right? To have made a significant impact. But the fact that someone of his stature felt on a personal basis inclined enough to invest in startups actually gave a lot of domestic investors a lot more confidence that this is the future. So his contribution to startups cannot be just measured in 40 startups, which is not a big number for an angel investor. But the fact that someone of his stature who could apply his mind to acquiring any other business in the world was at that point of time feeling that no, I want to spend time with youngsters and I want to apply my mind to what they're trying to do, and maybe give credibility, give them confidence by even writing a small check, but writing that check. So his contribution to the angel investing community in general cannot be discounted at all.
Ashneer, Mr. Ratan Tata was also of the opinion that it's okay to think different. New ideas bring about newer entrepreneurship opportunities, but it is also important to keep, for a young entrepreneur, one thing in mind, that you also have to make a difference. That is what's going to get you success. It's not chasing money, it's not chasing dollars, it's how much of a difference can you create that really will resonate with your audience or your customers or whatever you want to call it. How much of a truth can you find in this statement?
See, I'm of slightly different opinion. I feel that when you are starting from zero, you have to be very, very focused on getting the business right and making money out of the business, right? Of course, when you are someone of the stature of the Tatas and Mr. Ratan Tata, where you've seen business across 3 generations, you've built institutions, you have built big businesses. You can actually then have the means to make a meaningful impact by doing any amount of philanthropy or nation building that you wanted to do. So I think he was in that sense blessed that he had over decades built Tata to be so big and meaningful that he could use some of that money to contribute back into nation building and philanthropy. For a young entrepreneur, I don't think they would ever have the money to first having satisfied themselves to actually make any meaningful impact to philanthropy. So I think that is in some sense to me reserved for people like the Tatas who have conglomerates and have huge profit pools.
All right, this may sound cliched, but this is an important question to ask anybody who's looked up to Mr. Ratan Tata. What do you make of his legacy, not only in business, but all the other things that he did? He was a philanthropist, he was somebody who believed in kindness, he was somebody who believed in serving India. You always had that, you always got that sense of him being an Indian first, then a businessman or whatever he was.
Yeah, I think, I don't think, he was very, very genuine. I think that is what people love about the guy. Even if he was doing philanthropy, he was doing it for himself. He didn't want a building to be named after him or an institution to be named after him. He was doing it quietly. Everyone knew he was spending big money into this, but he was doing it absolutely quietly. Did not want any fame out of it, and that genuineness is what sort of people are appreciating. I think in terms of legacy, I think he just lived a extremely rich life. To have seen what he has seen, to sort of grow up with India, right? It's just an amazing life, and I think it needs to be celebrated. I know it's a sad moment, but I think it's a great life is all I can say.
How do you think, Ashneer, last question before we let you go, how do you think he was instrumental in carving a niche out for India in foreign markets and the world outside of India?
Yeah, I think See, of course, he made a lot of acquisitions, right? In steel, he bought Chorus. He also bought Jaguar Land Rover, right? Um but I think uh, that just does not define him, right? How international you went, we think that's achieving something, but I fundamentally don't believe so. I think the impact he made domestically, the number of businesses Tata is in, and consistently keeps delivering value. I think that's his true legacy, rather than did he take India to the world? I think he, as a name world over, people, if you talk about two, three businesses in India, his name would always invariably crop up.
All right, Ashneer, I'm tempted to ask you one small question before we let you go. If you ever had the chance of interacting with Mr. Ratan Tata, what two questions would you have asked him, to pick his brains?
You're putting me on the spot, yeah, but I think like for the first question is, in a very political country like India, how does he keep himself apolitical, right? That would have been
That's a great question. I'm glad I asked you that. That's a great
yeah,
question.
yeah. So that would have been the first thing, and the second thing probably would have been, why did he get married, right? So
All right, Ashneer, appreciate you took out the time. Thank you so much. Loved your answers. It's obviously a sad day for the entire country, but like you said, and we'll keep that in mind, it is also an opportunity to celebrate and follow what Mr. Ratan Tata left behind. We'll take a short break. Be right back.